Chris. Thanks so much for joining me to talk about Cursor for a little bit.
How's it going? Good to be with you.
It's good. I appreciate that we can, find time to even play around with this on the weekend a bit and try to, show people that I think really the landscape of design tools has completely changed. Like more and more, I would even say in the past 2 months, most of my work is like 5% Figma. And then I've actually find like maybe 25% V0 from I would say the remainder, sort of 60, 70% would be Cursor. I'm not really using Figma nearly as much as I used to these days. And I'm loving it. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's a lot cursor and like it still blows my mind that cursor's even in the terminal to help run terminal commands. I've always thought I was pretty good at terminal commands, but then it'll just throw you something wild and it works most of the time. And you type in natural language, even in your code you can type in natural language. A guy in our office who doesn't use it too much taught me something cool the other day. It was like a good way to use it can be just commenting what you want to do, the old style, and just say, hey, give me an anonymous no name default export function here. And then the tab feature, which was they talked about extensively in the Cursor podcast, is like one of their best features. So I'm glad that they mentioned it because it seems simple, but it really is a whole step above what VS Code has right now.
What do you mean? Like, what about their tab
Like
feature specifically?
in VS Code, Copilot a little bit does how it'll autofill code that you want, kind of auto accept it. But Cursor has a special like tab functionality built in on top of that because, Cursor's a wrapper around VS Code. So some of the default VS Code features, they've just kind of extended in a really crazy way where tab, for example, when you press tab, it will usually get your export or your import of a file in one shot. And then what it can do that VS Code can't is it'll know through like prediction what step you want to do next. So the tab will go to the bottom of the screen and it'll say, hey, did you want to do this? And usually it's like, oh wow, yeah, I did. And so you can get like lines of code written one after another and it kind of predicts your next step, which is
Mhm.
really cool. And it's
It
just
is.
going way faster.
Yeah, there's been many times, even in like pair programming sessions, where we're like, wow, it just like didn't just read one of our minds, it read both of our minds, which has been
Yeah.
kind of interesting. And I don't know, I'm excited to screen share and actually show some people some examples of these. So, I think where I'd like to start is showing people how like we're able to use screenshots or design precedent from other products, whether it's for using Figma to make them, mob in to find templates, or even just using existing components like out of libraries, and then using prompts to generate entire pages that are high fidelity, functioning. I mean, Cursor will even go ahead and hook them up, to whatever routes that you've already got existing or create new routes for you, which is amazing. And, in my case, I think people are always surprised that like, or I feel like there used to be this huge investment in sort of design to code, right? You always used to hear about design to code workflows. And now it's just code workflows, which really excites me, even with what you do at Anima. But I can show some of the lazy sort of shortcuts that I like to take to try to use, Cursor as quick as possible as a designer. And then, yeah, we could talk a little bit about some of the way that you use the composer and some of those more advanced features, because I feel like I definitely use it quite naively, but it's very much like a tool for my purpose, right? As a designer, kind of trying to communicate front end is very different than some of the problems that you're solving, in the work that we do together.
And I think a cool thing is the way that everybody approaches it, since it's such a new tool, is always from a different angle. And it's cool to learn how other people naturally gravitate towards it because I always
Mhm.
knew. So yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's always worth
Um,
trying to
And
show.
then when you mentioned prompts, I thought I just think a thing to call out is that we were working together in a group with the other guys, and we were writing prompts. And a lot of the time, we were trying to finish sentences in the best way possible to be descriptive, and it just be like, just press tab. It got it, and it's like crazy how many times that happened to us.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. Like, it kind of blows me away in that regard for sure. Uh, Most definitely. So let me get these pulled up. I'm gonna just share my whole screen because I want to show cursor side by side to like what I'm gonna display because I think it'll be easiest to follow along. So let's see here. Maybe I can do. All right. Can you see my screen here? I've got the repo up for the assistant UI. And we could probably add a link to this in the show notes so people can access this repo easily.
Yep, I'm seeing.
Um, I've got it running locally. So here you can see I've like, I've got this assistant UI hooked up to just a simple model call so that we can kind of test out what's going on. And this project's like really simple, which I find Cursor definitely benefits from, tight, well organized repositories. Like I think at its core, that's something just to like really reinforce is that you still want to stay organized. You still want to keep a clear like relationship of parts and pieces
And
because Cursor's just going to do that much of a better job, exploring it. Um,
yep, having a well-defined pattern, it does really well in the traditional MVC model view controller because it knows what files to go look for. And like you said, when you're using the composer, sometimes it'll go create a new controller when you need it. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So in this case, like I mentioned, I use Cursor pretty naively. So a lot of times what's happening in our product development lifecycle is that with the pace of change that these apps are launching new features, new AI behaviors, oftentimes we're going and looking directly at what they've done and seeing how we can sort of replicate them or keep up, right? Um, and so I've got Perplexity pulled up here. And, just as an example, something I really like about Perplexity, ChatGPT, and many other uh, of these kind of answer engine type of interfaces is the conversation starters. And these conversation starters of like, giving people easy use cases to access like knowledge, see how the AI like behaves or performs. And, let's imagine in our app, we want to implement the same type of conversation starters, maybe below the message component, right? We can introduce that into our application. So what I always like to do first is actually just grab a screenshot. Like I don't even get too complicated with it, honestly. Just snag a screenshot there and save it to my clipboard. Now come back over to my app. And what I love about Cursor is that I can just Command V, right? I can drop that screenshot straight in and I can say, I'm interested in implementing similar conversation starters. And I try to use like, sort of camel case or like the same like sort of naming conventions because I find that Cursor tends to know that that's like a component kind of like label, right? It's going to pick up that that's what I want um, as the screenshot here, right? Now, what I'll do oftentimes is my first prompt as a designer, since I'm not as like fluent in sort of the repositories or the technologies, I'll say like, take a look at this code base and um, let me know where the best place like to introduce a new component like this might be given the like organization of the directory while minimizing major architectural like changes, right? And then oftentimes since like I do have some insight here, I'll let it know like important files, are at page inside of the app, at layout, right inside the app. This just like make sure that it's focusing on the things that I want it to focus on. And then, you know, I'll say like I don't really understand the relationship of the like my assistant component, um, but I know it's important. And then I'll say, where should we start? And I'll just let the AI like kind of guide me for a bit, Like I'll totally be open to like letting it kind of give me some insight. So it's going to go ahead and answer my question of how to create the component. I'll make some space here just so you can see this. You can see it even grabbed the text right straight out of the images, like perfectly. And so it looks like it's, sort of constructing those conversation starters, some icons, giving us that component, sort of just mapping it over a list of divs. And then we can inject that component right below the assistant component. So it's pretty simple, right? And so now what I really like at this point, and I find I tend to do is since this file doesn't exist, this might just be because I don't trust Cursor,
And
right? But
while you're
I'll
on that,
actually,
one thing like if the file doesn't exist, I've found super helpful is right above the apply. Sometimes there'll be a link in blue, like that components directory. If you click on it, it'll sometimes find the file for you, and then you can just apply to it.
right,
Yeah.
right, it'll just navigate straight to it. So I tend to like to just go ahead on new components. I like to make it and I like to just copy and paste it in first. Like personally, I like that control because sometimes I find apply feels a little willy nilly. I like to be able to sort of hang in here. So I'm gonna go like, how is Cursor AI different? Maybe I'll change some of these. I don't care about perplexity. We're good here. I'm gonna go ahead and save that component. Now, the good thing about app.page, right, is that it exists. And so here I'm just going to go ahead and hit apply. It's going to grab my components. I'm just going to hit Command Enter to accept it, save, and then see how this turned out. So let's go with, I wonder if I need to rebuild it in this. Let's see. Might not have like live updating on.
Right. Yeah.
All right, it's compiling. Let's see if we got our conversation started. There we go. All right. So it definitely, placed him below it, and it didn't quite do what I want because it sort of hit it below the fold, right?
Yeah.
And so now, what I find that we can do is start to like think about, okay, well, of course there's styling rules, there's things we want to change. I want to actually make these buttons rather than just kind of the simple list. And so if I come back into my conversation starters folder, this is where I kind of get back into that dialogue with Cursor, right? I could say like,
Yeah. And
hey,
then
this was a good start, but I'd really like to see the conversation starters divs have like an outline around them to appear more like buttons and kind of improve the vertical spacing, as well as in the other component of the page. I want to make sure that these are fixed to the bottom and don't make the page scroll too far. So let's see here. I just use my audio transcriber.
to show a
Um,
cool new feature, if you just cut that for a minute and then paste it in after, if you type slash, right, now you can go down and reference open editors, and it'll grab anything that you've been working on for that context. And since you're almost always using that as context, it's like super good feature.
that's cool. Yeah, that is fast. Yeah, for sure. That's great. And so let's paste this in and let's try to do another revision, show people how this works. This is where, like, if you listen to the old podcast, right, we talked about how it's so much more like sculpting. And so, you know, as I go through and review what the AI gave me, I can see that it captured, it actually added a shadow behind some of these and I added a border. So it did respond to what I wanted. So let's go ahead and apply that to my conversation starters here. And this is where I like to just go ahead and apply it because I know it's open. I know it's targeting the right thing. It just, to me, there is some like confidence there that I want to know it's pointed at the right file. Sometimes I don't really trust it, but it's surprisingly good, right? It's like surprisingly gets aimed at the right files um, very well, uh, I would say. While that's updating, let's go down here to the home component. It looks like it just updated um, the home page. So let's just go ahead. See if we can cancel that guy. Let's apply this one. Accept it. Sometimes we need, cursor to come back. So let's try. I just like to copy. Sometimes it's just faster. Still, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
and so it looks like it got the buttons and it fixed those to the bottom, but I need my input, my chat input still. So most likely what's happening has to do with the position information on like fix, right? On the assistant side of things here. So let's see where that's fixed to. And this is another great example of cursor, right? Where I'll just grab this um, file. I'll use Command Shift L to just send it over to my input box here. And although I was already targeted at it, I find myself still just like Command Shift L, push it over. Like, and even like you said, I can now use that / reference open editors, make sure I grab all of my content and say, hey, like my input box for the like assistant is now hidden behind my conversation starters that I made. Please like help me fix so the input box is fixed above like these new conversation starters. And then if you hit Command Enter, right, it brings the whole like code base, which I think is helpful. Yeah, see, it even grabbed, right, that it needs to add that wrapper with a fixed position. I mean, it's so like spot on. I mean, and so here, since I know what it's going to add, I can just grab that piece. Like, and again, I find myself like if I'm looking for something specific, I'm not just taking everything Cursor gives me. I'm skeptical. I don't trust it. And I really would encourage everybody to like be targeted about that. I, I, I I
And
think it's a fine balance of
a small
what you
point to
allow
make.
it to do for you, you know?
Yeah. And I would encourage people to like read the above like justifications it makes, because it can also teach you things about like its thinking process. It uses some really cool fixes sometimes. So I often learn from it
um,
explaining itself, what it's doing. It's sometimes it's a good read.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So here, let's see if we can. So it's giving me an interesting, let's do this. There we go. That's a little better. I wonder if it's going to actually display. Yeah. All right. We're definitely getting somewhere. Um, and so I can play around with this more where like, I think because the entire thread component is like, maybe if we did like H full, let's see. But this is where it's the sculpting in my mind, honestly,
Yeah.
is like you just kind of find yourself going,
And it's
um,
surprising how well it did, because I would say CSS is the thing it struggles with most.
yes, right. Let's,
Probably like a justify between or something.
yeah, right. It's still like, I think because they're separated into two different components whenever you're on this page, I
Hmm.
wonder if we need like, yeah, that like justify.
Yeah. I mean, to show like another feature, this may not work, but like if you highlight the My Assistant and Conversation Starters,
There it goes. Oh, that's better.
yeah, it's better.
Sorry,
So
go ahead. So,
highlight line 7 and 8, and then hit Control K. And this is a good place to say, wrap these components in a flex row and and space them with space between vertically. And that's how you can do little one-shot fixes with that command K.
Yeah. See,
And it's faster
save
because it's
it.
just doing those. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is super fun. I think in these regards, like something also that I want to kind of just mention, if uh maybe it's worth trying here to show how I think now, and we'll have to like work on the scrolls and things. I think this is the sort of trap of like designers like me getting into code. I can mock my ideas up at a greater fidelity, but then very quickly can sometimes get over my skis on the front end, and you start to like, is it really about me solving, making this like scroll work properly, or is it more
Yeah.
about just making sure I communicate like these types of buttons that I want? What am I really, what am I
Yeah.
really focused on solving at the time?
I think that illustrates the need for, as we work on these things, is like in the cursor rules and the further instructions for cursor, like we find ourselves needing design guidelines where it's like, hey, make sure that the comment box doesn't get hidden behind the scrolls and stuff like that. And I think with better like awareness of its own context, it can do even better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, so maybe this is a good chance where I could pause here, show people how a screenshot can give you so much information, to talk to cursor with, and I'd love to pass it over to you to like uh kind of show the composer a bit if you want
Yeah,
to kind of talk people through that before we wrap up.
sure.
So stop sharing, so you should be able to take over now.
Okay. So I was gonna jump in to Figma really quick here. Can you see the Figma?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is tail admin. I know that our stuff's working in our projects. I'm not sure if we can show that, but I was just gonna shout out really quick the two plugins I use in Figma to take. A lot of times when I'm working with Eli, I'll take his mockups and get a foundation of code spun up really quickly in Figma using their AI tools. So we're not just like using Cursor, we're kind of trying to utilize any AI tools we have. So here you can select any page. And with these two plugins I use, you usually have to be in dev mode, which it'll appear right at the right of your screen and generate code for you. But if you go and right click, go to plugins, these are the two plugins I mostly use is Anima, which is great, but it tends to overdo it and overthink it, but it can be useful. And then Builder.io. So I could show Anima really quick. Is just you use this and then it's taking this page right here from tail admin mockups and you say get code and it can generate a mockup to React code or Vue code. And if I click React, it uses AI to generate the code. I can go to Anima. Hopefully I'm logged in.
It's funny, man. I remember Anima when they first came onto the scene.
Yeah,
They were tied into a tool called Sketch. And,
yeah,
at the time, the prototyping stack was Sketch,
yeah,
InVision, and there was a plugin called Craft. And Craft is what enabled you to do some of the early prototyping, where you could just link screens and click through them. And then Anima actually came onto the scene as an animation tool to improve your prototypes. And it, gave you the ability to animate elements like in these old school Sketch, InVision, Craft like prototypes. And so they had some of the first like key editors, timeline editors where you could like scale things, transition them, and never would have anticipated them, kind of land on a sort of code, like a design to code tool like
yeah.
they did, right?
And I just think this is fantastic because like I just picked that mock-up and then told it to generate code based on all of the boxes and Figma elements. And it almost always gets it just dead on. And it creates buttons for everything with React components that are already clickable. And then the job on the dev side is to plug them into the right place, add the
Is it
logic.
making storybooks components as well there in the top left?
It
Like,
looks like it. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
that's
cool.
really cool. It spins up an entire project, which is my gripe is that I don't need an entire project. So it'll spin up like a roll up parcel project with a Babel compiler, which is like a little bit, in my opinion, goes too far because it's like a lot of the time I just need to
I
plug
just
it.
grabbed a page, right? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's got your
yeah.
screens, your reset password, all the logic. It's pretty good. And then what I usually do is like I don't need all these class names, so I'll highlight the whole thing and tell like I'll bring it in as a folder into the project we're working on, and tell Cursor to clean it up. But then I just want to show the other one that's a little simpler and works for my needs better is this builder.io, which is a new one. Plugins. If I do builder.io, it right
Yeah,
here,
and
it's
I was
preview
just,
what
I
it's
was
going to
just,
generate. Yeah.
I was just gonna mention Builder.io for people that don't know is like a no-code development tool that has some like out-of-the-box APIs you can hit. I think they're definitely doing some really great things, you know, similar to like between like Builder.io, Glide apps. I mean, like there's so much power coming in out of no code these days. It's pretty impressive. It's worth a look.
Looks like, I mean, in dev mode, Anima has a built-in plugin to Figma, but Builder always brings it to their own Builder IO that Eli just mentioned. And one of the cool things about this one is you can like choose your framework. It's got a lot more frameworks, Flutter, Svelte. You can even make a React Native app, and then the
That's cool.
styling. So it's got like CSS modules or style components, but it does Tailwind, which is cool because we use that all the time.
Yeah, big fans of React Next, you know, Tailwind altogether for sure.
Big fan of TypeScript, so it could do TypeScript, and then you could do even testing with this one. So this one, I don't know. I
What's the
really
testing framework options? Like that's kind of smart. Like,
V test. That's for Vue, or well, that's for Vite if you build in Vite. But like
mhm.
Jest is React, so that works. We could,
And so is it actually gonna go ahead and like generate some unit tests based on the front
yeah,
end?
kind of like simple front end unit tests.
That's cool.
Yeah. So let's
Because I
see.
would say that's the thing that we've been looking for the most, especially like even with, you know, our other teammates is like a for as good as generative AI has gotten, it feels like there's not really clearly like a good automated unit testing like generation framework yet, you know?
So this goes in and generates it kind of the same. It's cool to see it. It's a lot like the composer I'm going to show soon. It goes in and generates all the files and shows you what it's doing. And I like the way that it breaks this up a lot more than it's just, in my opinion, like superior right now to Anima. I mean, I think Anima does a lot from zero to hero, but this one goes from like zero to more dev friendly. Where like, hey, I just want to plug something in, like Eli said. I can just take this menu item and now I have a component that it's
Now, I
everything I,
think the interesting thing about Anima choosing to go ahead and like formulate it as a project is that you can start to see sort of the box model relationships. And I think that that's probably the biggest issue I have with the way that I tend to approach it, like you just saw, is like when I am trying to inject a component and I don't have like a deep understanding of the box model of the page,
yeah,
I could battle styling for 30 minutes.
yeah, for
When
sure.
if I start at the overall box model, like sort of layout articulation, I can be so much more targeted about where these things go and run into less problems for sure.
What, um, And the one thing to call out is that like this looks similar to the pages we work on in-house, and like it's taking this
That's what's already generated, right?
this is what's yeah, this is what's generated, right?
Wow,
And so
that's so
it's like
crazy.
one for one killer. And
Some of the like spacing's a bit weird, right? Or like it gets the
yeah, so
padding kind of off,
like
but
here
yeah,
it's a little off, but like that's what it does take a little post tweaking. But like look at the header is like phenomenal
spot
for
on.
like generated. I mean, and then it's cool that it just is blows my mind that it took this text, which was just like RGB text,
Pixels, right? Yeah, they're just pixels.
but it found BG Slate 100 or like the Slate equivalent in Tailwind, text Slate 500. And like
Mhm.
it translates just RGB to what I need in Tailwind, which is like not so easy to do.
That is crazy. Yeah. It's just the Figma file have that. Can you go back to the Figma file though? Like
Yeah, let's go
whatever
back.
you're selecting, is it dependent on like select that text? Like what's the color of Figma?
So I come in here, I select it.
Yeah, so if you see there,
There's,
it's definitely pulling that from Figma's like
but if
tokens.
you look, it's just a hex. It's
Mhm.
64748E, which
It,
it took and said, hey, this is like text slate 500. And so it's like figuring out what is the closest to this hex code. And that's pretty cool. I mean,
it is. It
it's
is
just,
great because I mean, I remember
yeah,
early in the days of like, consulting with some of these enterprise companies, right? Like so much of my background's in design agencies doing product design. And I mean, we would charge thousands and thousands of dollars for
yeah,
a high quality composed design system that people, could take and leverage going forward. And now, right, like I still think that work is there in terms of like front end
yeah.
development and implementation, but designers can sketch and draw and sort of do mock-ups at lower fidelities than ever. Literally you can take a photo,
Take
like
a
I've
photo.
used just fat, expo marker sketches, and Cursor makes them at high fidelity designs following our system like you're pointing out. So
And it's like
um
it's not a stretch to say that it creates a design I forget what you just said, but like a design library, a design standard on the fly for us, like and gets it pretty close. Like it's using this thin text here. It's
well, and
using
then
italics where it needs to be.
yeah, and then with linting, with good linting rules like the ones Matthias brings, like
Yeah.
it makes it even better because that helps us identify when we're deviating from certain
Yeah.
things like that as well. So
And I was gonna tell Matthias this because he's a hardcore linter. And then in cursor settings, they just added a special setting. Let's see, where is it at? It's usually in features or beta. Yeah, iterate on lints, which is in beta right now. If there are
yeah,
lints or
mine
errors,
does that too. I turn
Cursor
that on.
fix it.
Yeah,
So that's cool.
maybe actually, Chris, I think it would be good if we stay here in the
Okay.
settings for a
Oh,
second
yeah,
because I think maybe where we could end is like tell people like if you were setting up Cursor for the first time again, what are the key settings to be on the lookout for? And
yeah,
then let's save the composer for like a follow up, even if we record it, you know,
for sure. Yeah.
quickly
And
after this.
I think to
So
make
how
sure,
should somebody set it up? Yeah,
yeah.
where do they go?
So not to get lost on the composer. What Builder IO is doing is basically what the composer is, and we'll have another video for
I
that.
think yeah, I think composer is so intense that it's
Yeah.
gonna take its own like
And like Keith has been using that extensively, so I'd like to be in the room with him when we talk about
for
it
sure. Yeah.
and run us in on it. But like, so important to know if I was just like scanning through this and setting up cursor, there's a lot like um I've seen guys use cursor where they're like don't have it set up and they're like, well, how come it's not working for me? As
Why isn't it accurate? Yeah.
why isn't it accurate? And it's like, well, because you really do have to go into all these settings and make sure that it's configured to be accurate. So like what you can do first is like you can specify rules here. Like these are pretty good actually. Like in you could specify specific Rust things. You could say like always use React because this is a React project.
And sometimes in mine, I even say always use Tailwind,
Always use
always
tailwind, respect the linting
follow like,
styles.
and even like follow iOS design guidelines or
Yeah,
material design. 8-point vertical spacing rules as a just like I try to, and all of those things are so widely available on the internet. Like I know it's gonna grab some of those things.
yeah. And so I think that when you boot up Cursor for the first time, like this is going to be toggled off. And this is super important is like you want to get in there as quick as you can once you familiarize yourself with Cursor and start making your own Cursor rules file, which you place in the project just like an env. And it's in the head of your project. And that's where you really fill out these rules. Like we have a ton of them in our office where we do say like, follow 8-point styling. This is what 8-point styling is. Be really descriptive. I like a rule that says like, for words like should or probably, use more imperative words like must or you must follow these instructions because that makes sure that it goes and does it. So you can really rein it in and sculpt it, like Eli said. Um,
Mhm.
with this is this is probably the biggest one you want to set up. And this cursor rules file does take a lot of like your own
Yeah,
set.
but you can find dozens of
I
examples
was just
now
gonna
on
say like
Reddit. I would just go steal somebody's that you like, right?
Um,
Like,
the Cursor Reddit has a really good threads on what do you guys use for your Cursor rules file and stuff. And then just
yeah.
like Googling Cursor rules, like you'll find some really good ones. And what I do is in GitHub, I search for .cursor rules, and there's a bunch of people who've committed their dot files, their configs. And so in GitHub, there's some good ones too.
How does one access their cursor rules file for somebody who might not know how to get there
So
to edit theirs?
if I was going to set up a cursor rules file, and this is actually like a demo project we just spun up, so this is a good example. But I'd be in the main directory of my project, and then I'd add a new file that's .cursor rules, and then so anything in here is it's going to listen to. So like always use React, always use the latest version of the assist, whatever that was. So like
Mhm.
if I said this, it's always going to do that. And in every prompt I send it, it's got cursor rules attached now. Well, this is because it's open, but it's going to always read this.
Yeah, right. My understanding is that right, if it exists in the directory, it's going to use them. And this is where if you're finding you're having those behaviors of like you're constantly saying the same thing of like, for example, like give me complete code examples or don't focus on page and layouts, always focus on injectables. I sometimes I'll like really push it to be um very, very clear. And then another rule that I use, I even in my personal one is like, I like knowing what it's going to do and why. And just like you're sharing here, like an explanation and giving me complete code blocks, but giving me the choice of what to apply and not.
Um,
And I don't know always how much of what I'm telling it is like truly directive and is working, but
yeah, because
you
to go,
know, what I always think about is like whenever you make your character in an RPG, right? Like we both like video games. And when you make your character in an RPG, there's been research done that shows that the length of time that you spend in the character creator is the length of time is like correlated to the length of time that you'll spend in the game. So people that take 2 hours to make their character are going to spend longer in the game than somebody who just takes like 10 minutes to make their character. And that's because like you get this emotional investment building your character, right? You become connected to it. And in some ways, I feel like cursor rules are kind of like that, right? It's like building your AI that's going to support you in development. And the people that spend more time here setting up their rules
yeah,
spend
Absolutely.
way more effective time in cursor.
You do get better answers for sure. And just on a little bit on prompting is like, um, this is a big one. I like to say, like, think about the steps you're going to provide before you provide them. Almost like what I call it is a scratch pad. And then I say, explain those steps to me before providing your answer so that I can see its thought process and either like cancel it before it goes down the wrong road or not. And then this cursor rules file accepts any sort of like prompting syntax. So the prompting style guide by OpenAI, anything in there,
Uh-huh.
it really does you well to follow that, because if you provide this explanation inside of like special tags, you'll see those tags when it answers. And so like if I call this like the scratch pad, but let's say it's details, and then in a special prompting format of like array brackets, I'm blanking on it, but if you put this in the explanation, right, it's going to fill anything of this explanation inside of these tags, and it makes it so that it responds better and it responds more often, telling you its steps. So like
Uh-huh.
having these special XML tags is like very big in this cursor rules file. And I would like, that would
Yeah,
be the
I
biggest
see.
advices.
So like, yeah, you're using XML to create like what are called delimiters
Yeah.
that give it kind of like demarcated sections of
So
text.
then, yeah. So then if I put this down here, it's delimited and it knows, okay, this step's done, go on to the next. And so it kind of can break it up. But let's go through more. So the models, like you can turn on, I think that one preview is not turned on by default because you need your API key. So when I'm setting it up here, we have a team API key, so that's why mine is turned off. But if you want to use O1 preview when you're setting up cursor, you're going to want to turn this on, enable, and then you're going to be able to use one preview or the models that you have on your account.
Mm, yeah.
We have the enterprise subscription, so that's why I turn it off so that I'm able to use these two. And then Anthropic, Claude, shout out to Claude because I mostly use Sonnet because I find that they give really thought out answers that don't go astray often.
Mhm.
And then in your features, almost all of these, well, like the beta ones are turned off, but I always find these like infallible and I turn them on all the time because they're very helpful. And then I turn these on as well. Partial accepts, which is like what's used for that tab feature we talked about at the start of the podcast.
And then same thing with like triggering comments as well. Like I think that one's really, really important. Like for me, I like the cursor suggestions in the comments because again, when I lack the right like nomenclature vocabulary, when cursor fills that in for me, my accuracy and results go way up
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's helping. I mean, that's the most amazing thing about these systems. Being language based, like they've given me a language to talk about programs and applications in ways that it didn't prior. Um,
So yeah, that's
so
the difference here is of cursor tab and Copilot tab is like cursor tab suggests changes across multiple lines. So you can do
it's so
tab
good.
and
Yeah.
it's wild.
I mean,
And
it'll build a
it
whole
works.
component. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
like, just based on if you write in natural language as a comment and then enter down,
Yeah.
it will give you a whole component suggestion where you're like, add a, yeah, say like write a comment that's like, oh, I should inject like a left hand navigation here. And then boom, it makes the component.
And
It's phenomenal.
it skips across the components it doesn't need to affect to other places in the code, which is crazy for tab. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
Cool,
then
man. So I think, yeah,
the last thing I want to mention is like I've filled in just like OCD with all the docs I possibly need. And this is huge. Is like
are you
adding.
sharing those with our team? You should
I
be.
am.
I
Yeah.
hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Every time I add a doc, like if I add a new doc, of Tailwind, it asks you do you want to add it to the team? And Teams is like a shared cursor account where you use the same cursor rules. So like your project manager, project technical lead can like start that for you. And then when anybody needs docs, they can like, we have all the Tailwind docs added and stuff like that. And I found that
Okay.
it indexes them and references them sometimes when it needs it. So the more docs you add, the smarter it gets, which is like,
Yeah. And also something that I've found like really helpful, especially in times where I have those like ideas for like, hey, as like a team lead, I want Chris to go and try out this, this feature, and maybe Bobby can go work on this feature. Like even as like a sort of technical lead or project manager, if you will, I'll come in, I'll have a dialogue with Cursor, and I'll even ask it, questions along the lines of like, how can I be clear about how to implement this? What documents from our team should I use? And it even works in reverse where it'll tell me like, oh, like this documentation could be helpful for Matthias to know about, which is pretty powerful. So,
like I remember
um,
one of the most banger solutions we had was when we were working on an insurance project and we needed these Nevo docs for the Nevo components. And they're these like awesome animated
the
components,
charting library,
charting library. We fed in the docs and it got it like one rip and it was crazy.
one move. So new library, installed and displaying in seconds,
Yeah. Yeah.
just by attaching some documents and pointing it at the library. Like, I mean, I think that's a good way to kind of transition our final question, and then we'll wrap up. Is like, given what we've talked about Cursor and how we're using it, it's a daily tool. It's
Yep.
vital. It's actually the most expensive tool we use in our business. And so I'm just curious, like knowing, hey, you can make mock-ups and more complicated interfaces quicker than ever. If you had to zoom out, like how does design change, right? Like how does creativity change given what we've got kind of with this AI in mind now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that on my end, I tend to think really ambitiously. And I think that, I mean, we've had just 15-page mockups that we've been able to get in there. And so I think that previously you'd have to hire a couple junior engineers to get those in like 2 weeks, and we're doing them in days.
No, we did an entire onboarding flow, right?
Then
From
one
like
in 1 or 2 days.
user sign up, email transaction, set a password, get to a homepage, reset a password, edge cases
And
in two days.
it was
In
not
2 days.
simple either. It was like using templates from AI and stuff. So it's like feeding in all the
Dude,
logic.
we
Yeah.
would have charged an organization $25,000 to build that in the
Yeah.
past.
And not quicker than we could have done it either. They would have
Yep, it would have
like,
been
we'll be
slower.
back to you in a month or something.
Yep.
And so I think like ambitiously, I'm like, we can expand our design to really have anything we want and be confident that we can get it in there in a time where clients are happy that amazed that we got it done so quick and it's so good. It's like now the sky's the limit for whatever we want. And on your end, you can, you know, go wild with it with kind of like more what would have been risky designs in the past. Like, hey, we want a carousel, okay, we can do it,
Hmm.
and previously it'd been like, well, let's, step back and see if we could get that done in time. It's like now now we have our time free to like see what features we want to add. So pretty optimistic and like excited about it.
Me too. I really think that if teams use Cursor, like if you imagine, or the way I would say this is like our small teams of 3 to 5 people working on projects immediately with Cursor and like really enable the AI workflow, those teams of 3 to 5 are actually teams of 6 to 10
Absolutely. Yeah.
immediately. And you could even think about it if you build on that. Most teams, you know, 18 months ago or 3 years ago, most teams didn't have the front end UX engineer or the like creative technologists that maybe did more elegant, sort of thoughtful look and feel kind of interaction design. And now, with a couple of docs,
Yeah.
couple of established libraries and design framework, literally these cursor requests cost 0.003 cents.
Yeah.
Like you've taken a role that used to cost hundred thousand plus dollars, and now like we've commoditized that role that we're just able to get that kind of talent on demand in any situation we need, and they're available for all of our engineers tied to our team.
Yeah.
Like like
And
there's no going back. You know
what
what I
I'm
mean?
trying to articulate is that it kind of helps to expand the edges of your mind and the edges of our team's mind is like, because you're a maestro at these mock-ups and designs, and anything that previously you thought would have been a stretch is kind of now not. With tying back to what I showed in Builder and what you can do in Cursor, where Builder's already starting to add these simple unit tests. And on the horizon, I think that it's only going to get more robust with these, like Matthias, our senior engineer, he's going to love that, is like adding tests to all our components,
Yeah.
going to expand the edges of his mind. He's going to say, hey, we can add tests to this like on the fly as we're building this. So the testing, the technical kind of precision that we can add to the creativity on your end is like,
Yeah, because imagine if Matthias just gives us, or Keith gives us a standard unit testing type of like sort of framework. We put that in our cursor rules files, and every time we generate new component or new patterns, it comes with a unit test that they're going to at least be familiar with. Like I mean, that's amazing. And
Keith and I were playing with adding unit tests to the most recent stuff we were working on, and it really nailed it. And I also know we can take it further because the very first things these AIs that started as VS Code extensions were doing were just the only thing they started out being able to do was add unit tests or like, you know, coverage tests.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's some,
The interesting thing is like that's still the shittiest use case of it. I would tell you
yeah,
there is not a great automated testing platform yet, but I could see how Cursor gets there with all of the intelligence that they gain. So,
but I think that's
well,
their cause because like, the one knock is like, how do we make sure this stuff is safe iterating so fast? And if
mhm.
test it fast and we could build it fast, it's like a win-win.
Exactly. That's the thing we've got to get under control because, like, I think you and I both know that we've gotten into those situations where we're over our skis, and
Yeah.
you've made so many changes that invariably there's more weight like thrown out code because I mean I don't ever really balk at deleting in the same way like Matthias and Keith, like I think just moving through ideas is the best way to go, but you can zoom out and 15 files later you're like, okay, something's not right. I need to like sort of step back. I mean, the fact that we can do that in a matter of minutes rather than days or weeks now is just amazing.
It is. Yeah.
um, and so thanks a lot, man, for taking the time to talk through Cursor and share some of our knowledge. We're definitely going to keep putting the spotlight on it, keep talking about Cursor.
Yeah, let's have an
Um,
episode too for the composer with
I
Keith.
think Composer Deep Dive is this week
Yeah.
for sure. For all the listeners, be on the lookout. And Chris, I hope you have a great rest of your night. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, you too.